And I think that has a lot to do with, like, I had a person come in a couple months ago while I was doing a Catholic Q&A, and they were saying, well, how could God give rules to Moses of selling one's daughters into sex slavery? This is the way they framed their question. And I brought up arranged marriages in other cultures, as one way of approaching that particular question. And of course, they didn't seem to like that so much. But I mean, that was an obvious way of looking at, well, is that selling people? Is arranged marriage selling your daughter into against their will and to sex slavery? I mean, it may look like that to us. He still loses here. He tried, though. And I tried to also help because, number one, not to rehash what I went over at the time, to try to help them understand, the nature of things at that time, is God did and revealed things in a way that met that culture where they were at. Met humanity where it was at the time. That can be really difficult for people who have the fullness of God's revelation in and through the Incarnation. Looking back and saying, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why didn't God just completely outlaw that altogether? And in due time, those things worked throughout the culture, and, those things were eventually understood, and I think that's more to the point, is that God had revealed himself in very specific ways at certain times. That it could be argued, well, why didn't he just do the Incarnation and the full revelation all at once at one time? Well, it wasn't time for that yet. It wasn't the so-called fullness of time. All right. And someone may argue, well, why did God become incarnate so late in human history? Well, statistically speaking, only 4% of the human population lived prior to the Incarnation. Only 4% of everyone who has ever lived. That's pretty early in terms of argumentation for, the Incarnation. And so even still, though, there's going to be people who be part of that 4%, right? There's going to be people part of that 4% who don't have the fullness of revelation, who are living in a particular culture at a particular time. God had to get these people out of Egypt. He had to move them through the desert for a whole generation. He had to move them into a land that he promised to Abraham. And it's a very specific cultural context in which land was a huge commodity, and it had a lot of meaning to the identity of a culture, and so on and so forth. Some people just don't spend enough.
My greetings.
There's always more to all of it, How did I get on that? I think I was talking about cultures, understanding, historical context.